all three of them here have daughters. So what is your take on this?
This little sort of, in a way it points to, I think, a question about I think, which is also an ongoing kind of a question in our times, which is this whole need that we have to speak only through the lens of how things should be, and to the detriment of understanding how things are. Because it is important, of course, it is important that any change, and if you're going to progress and whatever that means, but if you are going to go, and look for betterment and improvement in life, it's important to have a vision and a point of view. But very often when that vision and that point of view becomes an overriding frame through which you look at every observation, then it becomes impossible to see the world as it is. Because you're forever tyrannizing it with what you think it should be. And you are always measuring the distance from your vision in your head with what the reality is, and you're not open therefore to describing the reality as you see it. This is particularly true in the question of gender, because it is impossible to have a conversation which describes the world without it being seen as an attempt to reinforce it. So if I describe that, there is for instance, the woman is a brilliant strategist, I must therefore be reinforcing it. To me, that is an absurd correlation that is being made here, because these are two different things. Also, the fact that I think one of the issues in India today is the fact that there is one particular group of people that have changed, and have changed remarkably and wonderfully perhaps, in many ways. But they assail the rest of India with the fact that they have changed, and therefore, it's strange. I mean, you look at a vast part of India which has been living pretty much the way it has for centuries. You have, in a small part of India, changed completely. Now, suddenly it is their responsibility to become like you. They don't have a clue how to do that. How do you suddenly lay that at their doorstep? They were living peacefully. You could argue that way must progress. But for you to be so intolerant of that existing reality and to consistently, call it names, to me seems like, an extreme form of this intolerance. So therefore, I think women in India, if you were to look at, from the other side, I think there is genuinely an enormous change. There is a radical revolution. I mean, it is in the mind you are seeing a change that is unparalleled. And there are, regardless of whether it is tragic that they have to use strategies or not, the fact is that they do, and they do it with an increasing sense of control over their world. An increasing sense of control over the world, which is really remarkable. And therefore this sense of being assailed, this sense of being, having to sort of, live in a world that has, largely been defined by men, etc., isn't the burden that you would expect it to be. That is acknowledged and moved beyond, and it is engaged with.
So, this is the only country I've been to, and I've lived in a few, where I am still routinely asked, what is your husband's name, and what is your father's name, but never what is your mother's name.
But what do you expect? This country is, how does it matter whether you've been to another? If the country is not responsible for you having traveled in the rest of the world.
No, but the country is responsible for that message it's sending to its women,
and
it's asking for the father's name rather than the mother's name.
May I add something? I remember I was interviewing a very famous engineer, and he suddenly asked me, what's the name of your family? Then I was trying to explain who I am. He said, I don't have to know who you are, I knew your grandfather. So it cuts both ways. And I think you got to understand to a certain extent, it's the way we construct identity. But I think the important thing is not this. The important thing is, you have to look at change through different lenses. It reminds me of an encounter that a Texan had with an American Indian. He goes to this reservation and says, we have progressed beyond you. And the Indian says, I'm glad we're both where we want to be. And I think I'm for change. But I think to a certain extent, we have to learn how to be plural about change, rather than coercive about change. Look at the tensions, look at the pain, look at the contradictions. And I think in a way that's what we try to do. You don't judge. You look at actual facts, you look at the pain of storytelling to the pain and celebration of the way people live lives.
But as long as you define identity with constructs of components of patriarchy, I don't think women will get to the stage of equality that I think all of us on this panel and most, probably, hopefully all of us in this room hope for. I mean, as long as you continue to define identity through patriarchy, how will things change?
I would respond to that. I remember the first time I heard we had an identity crisis was when I read an American sociology book. Because to a certain extent, our identity is plural. And I think we got to be careful about the use of the word identity. I agree with what you're saying, because there's a pain of a certain kind of injustice which we have to confront. And the exploitation and suffering in brain. But our notion of identity is very different. It doesn't fit into one name or one thing. I mean, it could be by caste, it could be by tribe, it could be by genealogy, it could be by language, it could be by a whole series of definitions. So I think our identity is a genealogy, it's a legacy, it's an explosion. Only Americans have an identity which sort of cuts down to 2 names. I think here we have to be careful. How do we construct an identity for the future is really the moment.
And how did our identity get hijacked from the past? Because if you look back to our mythological roots, again, some of our most powerful identities are female. It's Shakti, it's Durga, it's Kali, right? Parvati actually vanquished Shiv.
Shiv was quite happy.
Somewhere along the way, it got hijacked with this Pati Parameshwar stuff. So how did that happen? When did that happen? I don't know, but I hope we go back to our fundamental.
I hope we don't have advertising.